On behalf of the Colorado Department of Revenue, thank you for joining us to learn more about wage withholding requirements, licensing, filing frequencies, and due dates. First, I'd like to highlight the department's primary website to find all your Colorado wage withholding resources. From Tax.Colorado.gov. You can find online services, including Revenue Online, which is the department's customer portal required to manage your withholding account, and the most current Colorado Department of Revenue tax forms. You can also find information for tax professionals, businesses, and individuals. Discover an abundance of information by tax type or topic, including tax guidance publications, tax policy and research tools, and tax training resources. Now, let's get started with Colorado wage withholding tax requirements. In general, an employer required to withhold federal income tax must also withhold Colorado income tax on Colorado wages. In other words, if Colorado wages are subject to federal wage withholding requirements, they are also subject to Colorado wage withholding requirements. First, wages exempt from federal wage withholding are usually exempt from Colorado wage withholding as well. Yet, there are many nuances, such as the employee's state of residency. So, in situations where wages may be exempt from federal withholding, we encourage you to consult with a tax professional. Second, employers paying Colorado W-2 wages must withhold Colorado income tax from such wages. More in-depth information on this can be found in the Department Rule 39-22-604. If an employee performs work in Colorado, the wages are subject to Colorado income tax withholding, even if the employee is a part-year or non-resident. For example, if a permanent resident of California performs work in Colorado, the wages for the work performed in Colorado are subject to Colorado income tax withholding requirements. As another example, if the employee were a part-year resident of Colorado and a part-year resident of California, all wages for work performed in Colorado would be subject to Colorado income tax withholding. The wages of Colorado residents are subject to Colorado income tax requirements, regardless of whether a Colorado resident is working inside or outside of Colorado. For example, Wyoming does not require withholding tax on the wages of employees performing work in their state. So, if a Colorado resident performed work in Wyoming, then the employer must withhold Colorado income tax from the employee's wages. There is one exception to this rule. If a Colorado resident performs work in another state, and that state imposes income tax withholding requirements on the employee's wages, then Colorado income tax withholding is not required on those wages. For example, California requires income tax withholding on employee wages for work performed in their state. So, if a Colorado resident performed work in California, their employer must withhold California income tax on those wages, as the wages would not be subject to Colorado income tax withholding requirements in this situation. If there are other factors not mentioned in these general requirements, please consult with a tax professional. There are 4 important withholding account requirements for employers with employees who earn wages subject to Colorado income tax. First, employers must register with the Colorado Department of Revenue for a wage withholding license. Second, wage withholding returns and payments must be made on a quarterly, monthly, or weekly filing frequency. The Colorado Department of Revenue determines filing frequencies. We'll talk more about this later during the video. Third, a W-2 must be prepared for each employee. The federal Form W-2 must show the Colorado income taxes withheld from each employee's pay for each calendar year. Fourth, copies of W-2s must be provided to each employee and to the Colorado Department of Revenue. This needs to be completed by the employer no later than January 31st of the year following the close of the prior calendar year. Employers required to withhold Colorado income tax from employees' wages are liable. This means that if an employer fails to withhold Colorado income taxes when required, the employer is still liable to pay the taxes to the Colorado Department of Revenue. Now we'll talk about the 2 ways an employer can apply for a withholding license: by completing the Colorado Sales Tax and Withholding Account application, Form CR-0100. If an employer does not have a physical business location in Colorado, the employer must apply using the paper Form CR-0100. If an employer has a physical location in Colorado, the employer can choose to apply online or by paper. Examples of physical locations include an office, distribution facility, sales room, or warehouse. When applying using Form CR-0100, it is important to fill out all parts of the application that are required and that apply to your situation. The most common and frequent reason a CR-0100 is delayed or denied is due to incorrect or missing information. Please note that Sections C and E are only required if you intend to also apply for a sales tax account. If you need additional assistance completing the application, the form and instructional video are available on our website. Go to Tax.Colorado.gov. Select Forms, then Forms in number order. Scroll down, and the first form on the list will be the CR-0100, Colorado Sales Tax and Withholding Account Application. Select the link for the CR-0100 instructional video. Employers that have a physical place of business in Colorado also have the option of applying online through MyBiz Colorado at MyBiz.Colorado.gov. Employers eligible to apply online using the MyBiz Colorado platform can also apply for an unemployment insurance account with the Colorado Department of Labor. What's more, MyBiz provides links to other Colorado state agencies. For instance, MyBiz will have a link to the Secretary of State's website. The Secretary of State is the agency you would use to register a business in Colorado. Employers not eligible to use MyBiz will need to contact each state agency for agency-specific instructions. There are no license fees for a wage withholding account, but the department does assess application fees for other tax types. To apply through MyBiz, go to Tax.Colorado.gov. Select Online Services. Scroll down and select Visit ROL. Revenue Online is an administration portal that you can use to apply for a license, file returns, make payments, submit year-end withholding and copies of W-2s, and sign up to receive email alerts about important tax information, including changes to tax laws. Revenue Online also has a variety of helpful links you can use to perform actions such as submitting a power of attorney or e-filer attachment, verifying a license or certificate, sending us a secure message, responding or protesting to a letter, requesting a letter ID to create a Revenue Online account, updating your mailing address, or even closing your account. A Revenue Online login is required to manage your withholding account. We also know that understanding tax policy isn't always easy. So, to help answer common taxpayer questions, the department launched Dory, an automated, self-service chatbot on Revenue Online. Dory is the bright orange tax owl that roosts at the top of the Revenue Online homepage. Dory is a helpful resource whose vocabulary and answers are constantly being refined based on taxpayer feedback. We encourage you to use Dory the next time you visit Revenue Online, and when you do, please provide feedback so we can continue to tailor and improve Dory's information and answers to be more responsive for you, our taxpayers. During this video, you'll notice Dory joining us every so often to provide important messages and helpful tips along the way. To apply for a license, scroll down on the main Revenue Online homepage. Select In-State Retailer Registration, and you will be directed to MyBiz. Processing times vary based on how you apply. If you mail in the CR-0100 application, it will take 4 to 6 weeks to receive your official license in the mail. If you are only applying for a wage withholding account, you can email a completed application. If emailed, expect to receive your official license in the mail in 2 to 3 weeks. If you are also applying for a sales tax license, do not email the application. A sales tax license application received without a sales tax license fee payment will be delayed or even denied. If you choose to visit a service center to submit the CR0100 application, the license will be printed on site and received immediately. For employers eligible to apply online through MyBiz, the account number is issued immediately, but it will still take 2 to 3 weeks for the official license to be received by mail. Here's a helpful tip from our friend Dory. When you receive your withholding license in the mail, please do not throw the detachable part of the license away. Letters sent by the Colorado Department of Revenue each have a unique letter ID number. A letter ID number is valid for 30 days and will allow you to sign up for a Revenue Online account. A Revenue Online account is needed to manage withholding and other Colorado Department of Revenue tax accounts. Now that we've covered basic wage withholding requirements and ways to apply for a license, let's talk about filing frequencies and due dates. There are 3 wage withholding filing frequencies set by the Colorado Department of Revenue. Based on an employer's annual withholding tax liability, an employer's filing frequency will be weekly, monthly, or quarterly. Employers with a withholding tax liability of $50,000 or more per calendar year are on a weekly filing frequency. Employers with at least $7,000, but not more than $49,999 are on a monthly frequency, and those with $6,999 or less are on a quarterly frequency. Dory just joined us to share some very important information with you, as this is a common error we see with withholding license applications. Filing frequency thresholds are based on the employer's annual withholding tax liability, not on annual employee wages. The department can and will automatically increase an employer's filing frequency in certain situations. For example, let's say an employer's annual withholding tax liability was less than $6,999 when they first started. This means the employer was on a quarterly filing frequency. The next calendar year, the employer's withholding tax liability increased to $17,000. Thus, the employer exceeded the quarterly filing frequency threshold of $6,999 or less. Because of this, the department will automatically increase the employer's filing frequency to monthly. Changes made by the department to wage withholding filing frequencies take effect on January 1st of the next calendar year. Employers are sent a letter when there is a change to the filing frequency made by the department. Letters are generally mailed 1 to 2 months before the change takes effect, so please ensure the employer's mailing address is correct. I am going to pause here as this is very important. To avoid late penalties or interest, it is the employer's responsibility to communicate any filing frequency changes to any of its third-party preparers. An employer may elect, at any time, to file on a more frequent filing frequency. For example, an employer can increase their filing frequency from quarterly to monthly. An employer must request permission from the department to decrease a filing frequency. When doing so, the employer must continue to file and pay withholding under their current filing frequency until the department has made a ruling on the request. Dory is back to share an important message when it comes to withholding filing frequencies. Withholding filing frequencies are determined by the Colorado Department of Revenue, not by an employer's payroll cycle. The distinction between the filing period start, end, and due dates does matter. Knowing these important dates and how to use them may prevent errors in processing returns or payments. If a due date falls on a Saturday, Sunday, or legal holiday, the return and payment are due on the next business day. Weekly filing periods start each Saturday and end the following Friday. Returns and payments are due within 3 business days from the end of the filing period, which means the due date typically falls on a Wednesday. In this example, the employer has a withholding tax liability exceeding $50,000 per calendar year, which means they are on a weekly filing frequency. So any payroll processed by the employer starting Saturday, December 21st, and ending Friday, December 27th, would have been due on Wednesday, January 1st. But because January 1st was an observed holiday, The withholding was due the next business day on Thursday, January 2nd. Weekly filers are required to pay using an electronic funds transfer (EFT) payment method. In addition to the standard weekly filing periods, weekly filers have a final weekly filing period at the end of each calendar year on December 31st, regardless of whether the 31st falls on a Friday. The final payment is due the third business day after the 31st. This means that payroll processed during the final weekly filing period started per usual on a Saturday, December 28th, but ended on Tuesday, December 31st, the last day of the calendar year. In this case, since the first was an observed holiday, the withholding was due Monday, January 6th, 3 business days after the final weekly period ended on December 31st. Because of this year-end adjustment to the final weekly filing period, an adjustment will also typically occur the following week. In this example, the filing period the following week started on Wednesday, January 1st of the new calendar year, ended per usual on Friday, January 3rd, and was due as usual on Wednesday, January 8th. In our second example, the employer's total annual withholding tax liability is greater than $7,000, but less than $50,000, so the filing frequency is monthly. Monthly filing periods start on the first day of the month and end on the last day of the month. Returns and payments are due on the 15th day of the month, following the end of the previous month. For this example, any payroll processed by the employer starting January 1st and ending January 31st was due February 15th. In our last example, the employer's total annual withholding tax liability is less than $6,999, which means the employer is on a quarterly filing frequency. Quarterly filing periods start on the first day of each calendar quarter and end on the last day of each calendar quarter. Returns and payments are due on the last day of the month, following the end of each quarter. In this example, the employer remitted withholding taxes due for all payroll processed during the first quarter, which started on January 1st, ended March 31st, and was due on April 30th. For training on other withholding topics, including how to calculate withholding using the DR 1098 Colorado Withholding Worksheet for Employers, file and pay wage withholding using the DR 1094 Colorado W-2 Wage Withholding Tax Return, or reconcile and submit W-2s at year-end using the DR 1093 Annual Transmittal of State W-2 Forms, please visit our website at Tax.Colorado.gov/withholding-training. On behalf of the Colorado Department of Revenue, Taxation Division, Education and Training, thank you for watching this video on Colorado wage withholding requirements, licensing, filing frequencies, and due dates.